So my name is still Hari, and I was asked to moderate this first session, which is actually a keynote speakers session. We were supposed to have 5 speakers. We'll have only 4, but all of them are have so interesting speeches that I'm sure it compensates for the missing one. So the first speaker is I'll let him explain his path. But today he's at IBM, in charge with the support of external small enterprises, something like this. Because he has a great history of dealing with startups and integrating technologies in such a giant company like IBM. Gabi, the floor is yours.
Okay, I really don't for the TV, I'll use a microphone. I'll try to go faster through those parts that you are familiar with. Actually, I was born in IBM many years ago, so I know IBM quite well. I'm spending about 38 years with IBM since the era of the 360 mainframes, whoever still remembers them. And currently we are with the Watson, a supercomputer, so it's quite a long way since I really started until today. So I'll try also for the IBMers that are here to illustrate my short presentation with some stories from both IBM and outside that are related to our great industry. My role currently with IBM is being responsible for all the collaborations with external developers within Europe. I had the luck, everybody needs luck, and the opportunity to set up back in 2001 on the request of the top management of IBM Corporation in Armonk, a special unit here in Israel that was responsible to build relations between the Israeli high-tech industry and IBM, and I'll talk about it towards the end of my presentation. So my presentation today will be actually divided into 3 parts. The first one will be a very short summary of the most updated IBM growth strategy across the world. Then I'll go and speak a few minutes about the way IBM is setting collaboration with external developers, with external ISVs, independent solution vendors across the world and in Europe. And I'll end in 3-4 minutes with what IBM is doing in Israel and why. Let's start with IBM strategy and growth strategy. The main reason, few facts about IBM. Everybody knows here that IBM is over 100 years old, that our income is a little bit over $100 billion. Our cap value currently, after a bad third quarter 2002, is about $240 billion, and every dollar that our stock is going down means $1 billion loss for our investors. But the first line is the most important one, and maybe one of the best reasons why we are here in this event. IBM learned actually over the years to reinvent itself through innovation, and that's the reason why we are 101 years old. The second point of growth is actually we are entering into a new era of computing, and I'll talk about it very briefly, and we are shifting into a totally new market and totally new buyers' behaviors. So let's start very quickly about the 4 growth engines that we have got. Back in 2008, when Obama was elected first time to his role as a president of the United States, and we had the huge collapse in the world economy, IBM took a very brave decision and reinvented itself the last time, or that was in 2008, and generated the new term that it was called the smarter planet. Everybody thought that it's a buzzword, marketing buzzword. I have to tell you that currently that's our business. We are not doing anything but smarter planet applications and support. And I'll give you examples. And most of our $100 billion income is generated through this initiative. The second thing is the world of business analytics. And I'll give only two examples regarding business analytics and regarding big data, what is called big data. I hate the term big data, but that's the term. The third issue is, of course, our growth engine is a new era of computing, IT. And we're talking about cloud, we are talking about many other cognitive computing and many other aspects of a new era of computing. And one of the most important, and the reason why we have got today Ginny Rometty as our chairman and CEO, is our activities in the growth markets. Actually, we shifted our main focus from what we are calling currently the traditional market, or in other terms, the mature market or the old markets, North America and Europe, and we are shifting many of our resources and activities to the growth markets. When talking about Smarter Planet, very briefly, those are two examples of Smarter Planet. The first one is Smarter Cities. We are doing everything we can in order to help the mayors to make their cities smarter. Now, let's not fool ourselves. Most of the mayors are undertaking projects with us due to the fact that they want to be re-elected, not because they want to help you to be more efficient or have better services. But, you know, that's business. And it's working very, very well. We've got about 2,400 Smarter Cities initiatives across the world, and it's growing and growing. And the areas, you can see on the top of the chart, the main areas. And just for you, one very, very small story. I promised you a few stories. About 3-4 weeks ago, I've met in Zurich, and Yankee will like it because it's a brilliant idea. In Zurich, two people, a father and a son, a new startup, a very early stage startup. They told me, look, Gabi, we've got a technology that can identify by centimeters a leak in a pipe under a highway anywhere in the country. So I told them, how are you doing it? They told me, listen, we invented a sensor. We don't have to go into the pipe. We are putting it in locations. And we developed a very sophisticated mathematical model that identifies the noise that is generated by a leak. Now, we have got two sensors in two locations, and they are transmitting a signal between them, and the latency of the return is identifying exactly where the leak starts, much before the pipe is exploding and generating a huge problem. And they are running now a pilot. So that's Smarter City. One example. The second area is smarter commerce. And if you're asking me, that's the most fascinating one and the fastest growing one. Again, few examples. We can today, when you are entering into a shop like Best Buy in New York, somebody will approach you and will say, hey, Mr. Cohen, very nice to see you again. How is the camera that you bought from us 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago? Do you need any accessories? That's one example of new smarter commerce, and it's already working. But the most important one is, of course, the data end-to-end that can be provided to smarter commerce organizations from the supply chain to the selling and services that are provided to the consumer. and everything in between. And today, with the current technologies that are available to us, especially with the mobile developments, mobile devices development, of course, the smarter commerce is an area that is growing and growing and is promising a huge amount of income and benefits to all. It's really a win-win situation both for IBM partners, developers, and the consumers and customers. And as you know, this world is changing very, very fast. The checkout, for instance, in shops is changing very quickly, and very, very soon you'll see more and more shops without any checkout. And actually, while you are going out, your bank account will be charged for the purchases you've done. That's why, by the way, IBM sold recently their point-of-sale terminal that is in every checkout in every shop to Toshiba, because we think that it's really the dawn of this phenomena that is called point-of-sale terminal. Now let's go to this next point, big data. I'm not going to read you all the terms that are in the chart. I hate the term big data. I don't know, I don't have yet a better term, but actually what we are talking about is how to transform huge amount of information into knowledge. So it's a knowledge system? I don't know. You'll select the name. But the quantities of data are becoming totally uncontrolled, and if we want to have very, very good system that will analyze the data on a real-time basis, that's the entire idea, not for research that will be available in 2 years' time, but on a real-time basis, that's the basis for everything, along with business analytics. So big data systems, or transforming huge amount of information in real time into knowledge through business analytics, is the name of the game of the new applications today. And you can see how much investment IBM did over the last 5 years in order to have the lead in business analytics, real-time business analytics. All of those, in those 3 areas, are acquisitions that IBM made over the last 5 years in order to lead this industry. And the last growth engine that we are talking before I'll talk about the next generation of computing is the growth markets. And when we are talking about growth market, we are not talking only about Brazil, China, Russia, and China, or whatever, the BRIC countries. In IBM, growth market means everything that is in Asia Pacific except Japan, everything that is in Central Europe, everything that is in South America, and everything that is south to the Mediterranean, Africa, North Africa, and Middle East, and the Middle East. Those are the growth areas, and IBM is setting currently offices all over those territories. The latest one is Africa. During 2012, IBM set new offices in 14 African countries where we didn't have any representation before. So actually, we are starting to see what's the revenue stream from those territories. It's still only something like 25% of our total revenue stream, but the growth markets are providing double-digit growth of between 10 to 20% per quarter or per year, while the mature market is either in a flat situation from growth point of view or under zero. So the growth markets are currently actually balancing IBM $100 billion a year income, and that's our main growth engine. The invention, so-called, of the idea of having growth markets was Ginny Rometty's one, and that's mainly the main reason why she's currently our CEO and chairman. Okay, now we are reaching the last growth engine, and that's the new era of computing. The new era of computing means going very deeply into the cloud environment, the new delivery system for most of the customers, mainly for mid-market, what we are calling mid-market. Mid-market means at IBM 100 to 1,000 employees, where the management of those companies doesn't want to have any IT departments within their organizations. They want somebody to deliver them their requirements. And IBM is currently building new set of computing devices or computers or data centers that are actually a full integration of hardware and software that allows a service provider to deliver an application through what is called currently the cloud by using a system that is self-balancing, self-resource allocating with all the security and all the virtualization that is required. The name of the family is Pure Systems. The three first members of the family are already announced and being delivered. One is mainly for the big organization, one for the smaller organization, and one from the data-intensive kind of application, a huge amount of data. And the last new piece of the new era of computing is the third generation of computing, which is the cognitive system era. We have been until today at the era of the programmable computers, all those that we already know. The cognitive first member is the Watson computer that has been announced about a year ago, 1.5 years ago. The first exercise that we have done with it is letting him to compete on Jeopardy with world champions. And we demonstrated how over a month the system actually taught himself to reply and to win the game. It's a self-learning system, not connected to the internet when doing it. And all the software that has been developed is actually software that enables the system to go through a learning curve and improve itself from the experience it's gaining in the field. We are very, very proud that the team from IBM Haifa Research Lab were involved in the development of the software for this system. And we are taking it now to a very, very high level of research projects across the world. It's becoming a solution that is being delivered by IBM, and that's the next generation of very sophisticated system for all kinds of applications. We are starting with the medical care, brain research, and other topics that are related to medical researchers across the world. So those are actually the fourth growth areas and IBM's strategy for the foreseeable future. The way that we are investing, and we are continuing to invest both in R&D and in acquisitions, is we are divesting all those things that are becoming commodities. And you can see a list of items that we divested during the last 10 years, including our PC activities. And actually, the list on the left demonstrate lines of business that in the past contributed to IBM around $15 billion. However, we are still above $100 billion. And in spite of the fact that we have sold it, we grow our business in those four growth engines that I just discussed with you through acquisitions of 125 companies over the last 10 years. So actually, from the income and other activities that are related to generating additional income to the company, we acquired other companies that are supporting our growth areas. And over the last 10 years, we acquired more than 120 companies. And I'll talk about it in a minute. Out of them, 11 in Israel. So it looks like only 10% in Israel, but most of those 125 companies are American companies. And let's not forget for a second that IBM is an American corporation. Outside of America, we acquired less than 30 partners, and out of the 30, 11 in Israel. So it's a very, very significant number. So now let's talk for a few minutes, only for 5 minutes or less, about our growth engines with partners. I have to start and say partnership and collaboration is not a marketing buzzword. A lot of our competitors, without mentioning names, I'm trying to be polite, are using the name partnership and collaboration on a daily basis as a marketing buzzword. Partnership and collaboration is a product with functionality, with features, with processes, and with management system that requires a lot of investment. If you are not willing to invest, don't use those terms. Make sure that you are getting a return on this investment. So IBM got a whole line of business called ISVs and Developers Relations, a worldwide organization with more than 1,000 people, about 1,500 people across the world. Out of them, I've got about 250 in Europe, that all their roles is to build partnerships with external developers. From SAP in Germany to two-people startup in Switzerland, like the two guys with water leakage, and everything in between. Part of our investment in this organization is a network of 42 now innovation centers that we set up all over the world. Those are the 11 or 12 that I've got in Europe. Those are innovation centers that got the hardware, the software, and the people that are supporting the partners to test and sell and market their solutions, along with IBM. So each center is actually a building with hundreds of thousands of worth of hardware and software of IBM, with people, between 3 to 20 people, depends on the location, and with all the marketing and sales tools that are required in order to make the sale. On top of it, we are providing those partners a set of tools that really make their life much, much easier, including skill development, courses, workshops, marketing and business development activities. And there are here even now in this room people that got a portfolio of independent solution providers that are getting all the support for the go-to-market and for the tech support that they are requiring from those people. We've got, by the way, around 1,000 ISVs located all across the world that are already yielding revenue for IBM, and about 1/3 of them, a little bit more than 1/3 of them in Europe. And to be modest and nice, Europe is the most promising territory for IBM with regard to working with partners, and about 45 to 50% of the total pipeline and revenue that is generated jointly by IBM and the partners is generated in Europe, much higher than in the United States and Asia Pacific. So it's really a pleasure to work with the European partners, which are very, very innovative, even when compared to the Silicon Valley and others. So, and we'll talk about Israel and the Israeli part out of it, which is, again, the diamond in the crown. For the early stage companies, Yankee, that's for you, we have got a special program called Global Entrepreneurship Program that really caters for very, very early stage companies all across the world, with a huge amount of features that we are providing them, including a competition regarding Smarter Planet and who is doing the best and well-known and most effective solution. We had this year in 2012 a competition in 10 European countries, and the final one in Berlin that took place actually 3 weeks ago, with 2 winners that are going to participate in the world final that will be in February in New York. So, and they generate a lot of noise and a lot of exposure, and a lot of people are actually considering investing in those companies as a result of the exposure that those early stage startups are getting. Now, why Israel? So I don't have to convince anyone here why Israel. I just wanted to show you a very, very recent research. Look at the date on the bottom, 20th November 2012, where Tel Aviv is ranked from the innovation and startup ecosystem point of view, second in the world after the Silicon Valley, much before New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, and so on, and Paris and London and all the others. So it's really proud to lead Europe, but it's really a great privilege to lead the partnership activities with Israeli startups organizations across Europe. And they are generating really the highest level of innovation within the territories that I'm responsible for. What is happening with IBM and Israel? So let's put it straightforward. We are in IBM, in Israel, more or less at the same period of time that Israel exists, from 1949. For IBM, the conventional business that IBM is doing in Israel is very, very insignificant. If tomorrow IBM will close their office in Israel, it won't change the value of our stock even by 1 cent. We are a fraction of a percentage of IBM total business in a total. But what makes IBM Israel very important for the corporations are actually 3 major activities. The first one is the acquisitions that we have done here. And those are only 9 out of the 11 because those 9 were also registered in Israel. There are additional 2 that are registered outside Israel, but their R&D is in Israel. All of them became part of our development labs. The second reason is our R&D labs. The R&D labs that IBM got in Israel are by far the largest that exist outside the United States. And we've got today almost 1,000 people that are being employed by IBM and are part of our research and development activities, both in hardware and software. And the last one, which is my baby, that I've set up back in 2001, is a global technology unit that is actually responsible for the development of relations between IBM and startups and ISVs in Israel, from Amdocs in the north to 2 people startup in the south. We are doing it for 11 years now. It's one of the most successful growth engines that IBM Europe had over the last 10 years in Europe. This organization that includes today about 40 people, both in Israel and outside Israel, dedicated to those activities, are generating today for IBM and for the ISV an amount of almost $2 billion of revenue for both parties, which is very significant, very important, and a major contribution both for IBM, for the Israeli economy, and for the developers in Israel. We have a whole set of business development process, and we are very proud of having it in Israel, and it became actually a model for the entire IDR organization across the world that is slowly building the same type of processes and guides and guidelines and activities similar to the one that the GTU is doing. I'm asking always, but I won't ask you today, what makes the Israeli high-tech industry or the industry developers so unique compared to others. And many people are telling me about innovation and about the Jewish brain and all kinds of other things that are mentioned in many areas and books, and including the Startup Nation. But actually, the most important phenomenon is that there is no market in Israel. And from day one, each ISV, each startup has to consider and analyze how he's going to sell his product outside of Israel. And this is not the situation in any other country in the world. Everywhere else, a startup is set up in every country in order to solve a solution for the local market. It applies to Germany, UK, US, and any other country, maybe with the exception of Ireland. Anyhow, as I've mentioned, this process and activity is very successful, and it's an ongoing process that is generating, as I've mentioned, quite a significant amount of income for both IBM and the ISVs. So that's, in a nutshell, the description of what we are doing. And if you've got any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you. Yeah. So commerce actually is a phenomenon that relates to cross industry. It doesn't relate to commerce and distribution. It relates to travel and transportation. It relates to banking. It relates to telecommunication. And you can see a lot of examples that are coming out on a regular basis, and without even us feeling it, we are downloading a new application to our smartphone, and it's actually smarter commerce. So if, for instance, tomorrow I'll call my communication cellular provider, operator, and inform him, dear supplier, I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm fed up from your service and I'm moving to Cellcom. If partner will be clever enough, within 5 minutes from this minute, he will distribute an SMS to the first 30 people that I am calling on a regular basis and offer them a better package. So that's smarter commerce for telecommunication. For banking industry, I'll give you another example for banking industry. In most cases, when we want to build up a portfolio of investment, we are entering into our banker, and the banker is telling us, we will prepare you a new portfolio, please come back within 2 days. And by that, they lost the customer. But if they will be able to tell the customer, would you like to have a cup of coffee? And by the end of him having the coffee, he will get a new updated portfolio that really meets his requirement, they got a customer. So that's smarter commerce for all the other industries. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the day.
Okay, thank you. What you've seen on the background, by the way, is Christine Pfeiffer joining us from Rome, I guess. So hello, Christine. She will be our last speaker in this session. Now, if one had any doubts about the evolution of IBM, I was thinking, Gabi, that as a IBM-born baby, you were probably came out to the world with a tie on your neck, and right now we can see how you should. So this is another example, but you kept the same logo for T, so that's an interesting combination. Now, our next speaker is Yanki Margalit. He's a personality which is difficult to be described in one sentence. Personally, I remember I was, I think, one of the first customers of his HASP device when I was at Israel, a young engineer at the Israel Aircraft Industries. I still keep in only as a key holder the e-token, which Aladdin produced sometimes later. I'm also contributing to some of his social entrepreneurship initiatives. And most recently, I'm following him with his philosophical approach about singularity and the future of technology and innovation and mankind in the evolution of humanity. Frankly speaking, I have no clue what he's going to talk today, but I know that it's always interesting. So please receive Yanki.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. Let's see how it works. Okay, I need a clicker. Gabi, you took it? A clicker. It should be here. Okay. Oh, perfect. Little help from my friends. And okay, I'm going to talk about innovation today. But I'm going to talk about innovation from a very personal point of view. The opposite to IBM. I like IBM. It's a very innovative company. But I'm going to talk about individuals. I'm going to talk about us. Because if you ask me, we are the new basis or the new what really holds innovation in the future, individuals. Let's talk about it. And the motto here is, dream it, make it. Welcome to the age of dream it, make it. So, let's dream about this one. Fine. It was 2 months ago. I woke up in the morning and I felt really bad. I felt really bad about 22 tons of CO2. I did a fast calculation. I realized that my house generates 22 tons of CO2 every year. And I was shocked. So I decided to do something about it. What can you do? I mean, yes, you can turn off or on the lights, but I really wanted to do something more basic about spending 22 tons of CO2 every year. So I decided to generate my own energy. I decided to generate my own clean energy. And how do I do that? The first thing I did, I went to Facebook. And Facebook became, to me, a very supporting community. Not just for chatting and talking and putting pictures or whatever. Because when I posted on Facebook, friends, I need advice, I want to build my first educational solar tree project, I got experts in 2 minutes coming back to me and saying, really, you want to do it? Let's do it together. So immediately I got Shaul and Tzach and Gil, amazing people, they volunteered. We met a few times over the last 2 months and we built our first solar tree. Let me show you the tree. You see it on the left. It's a real product. Actually, it's such a nice product that if we want it today, we can productize it. It can be used in Africa, it can be used in villages, it can be used in the Galil. It's a product. It generates 2.5 kilowatts of 2.5 kilowatts per hour per day, and it can actually hold a small house. with lightning, with computers, with refrigeration, it can do it. It has batteries, it collects energy during the day, you can use it during the night. The fun part is that we were volunteers meeting once a week for 2 months, and we got the product out. This is do-it-yourself solar energy. And if you want to do it, you can do it. You don't need a government, you don't need a corporation. All you need to do is decide that you want to do it. So this is to do-it-yourself solar energy. And I'm going to show you today 10 more technologies that are accessible to each and every one of you, to kids, to teenagers who want to really change the world today. So we are lucky. We're living in the age of dream it, make it. My son won. I played chess with my son and he won. I was really embarrassed and humiliated, and I felt bad about it. So I decided to do something about losing to my son. What I decided to do was to build my own chess set. Maybe I'll have an advantage, okay? So what did I do? You know me already. I want to build my chess. I went to Facebook, yes, to my supporting community. So I went to Facebook and I said, guys, I want my own chess. Where do I start? It's Facebook. And I said, guys, I want to print my own chess, 3D printing. So Sefi Atias, very talented guy, immediately approached me and said, hey, Yankee, if you're looking for a 3D printer, why don't you go to Kickstarter? And Kickstarter, you'll find over there 3 ex-Israelis, now ex-MIT, who are building the next generation amazing, low-cost 3D printer. So this is what I did. So I went to Kickstarter and I became a backer of this new project. This is do-it-yourself funding. This is the way that projects will be funded in the future. No big corporations, no VCs, no whatever. You want to raise money, just find your customers eventually, and your customers will fund your business. And I became a proud backer of this printer. It is still in the mail. I'm expecting to receive the printer in a few days, but I was impatient to wait for my new printer, so what I did, I went to XLN. And XLN is a local Israeli non-profit organization that believes that the future of innovation and technology and entrepreneurship in Israel is all related to 3D printing. The point is that we are going to print our reality. Think about commerce, think about the reality, think about whatever you do if the 2 most common functions you're going to use are download, print. Okay? You want a cup of coffee, download, print. I mean the cup, maybe also the coffee. Okay? You want a gun, download, print. You want shoes, download, print. I mean, IBM were mentioning checkless checkouts out of a store. Who needs to go to the store? Download and print. Welcome to the age of information. Welcome to the age of being able to print your information in reality, 3D printing, and welcome to do-it-yourself 3D printing. Just go out, buy a couple of thousands of dollars 3D printer and do it yourself. Print your own reality. Of course, there are also the negative issues here. You have seen the articles about printing guns. You can print guns these days. The only problem, they will only shoot 5-6 times and collapse. Sometimes you don't need more than 5 shots or 5 bullets. So there are also negative issues there. I'll take questions by the end of... You can print missile parts, you can print so many things. Technology always has its dark sides, and we can relate to it by the end of the presentation. I'm an optimist today, by the way. I believe that, yes, technology always has its dark sides, but it's becoming more and more available to everybody. We'll have to be aware of that. So we have seen so far do-it-yourself solar energy. We have seen do-it-yourself funding. We have seen do-it-yourself 3D printing. Let's go on. Again, are you ready? We live in the area of dream it, print it, not just make it, but print it. I once heard that without 3D printing, we will not be able to really go to Mars. If you want to build your next colony on Mars, it's very expensive to send a breakfast from Earth to Mars. But if you can print your breakfast on Mars, again, it's information, then you can go to Mars. Three good friends of mine, Kfir, Jonathan, and Yoriv, wanted to go to the moon. They wanted to build a spaceship and go to the moon. Not personally, they wanted to send a robot to the moon. So what did they do? Where do they start? Remember that in the past, sending a spaceship to the moon was an empire business. Only two empires have been able to land on the moon so far, the Soviets and the Americans. So these are three engineers. They want to go to the moon. What do? Where do they start? You know the answer already. They go to Facebook, and one is saying, guys, I want to build a spaceship and go to the moon. So the other one is telling him, really? I'm with you. And you know what? They met in a bar, the only bar that there is in Holon in Israel right now. So there is one bar in Holon in Israel. They went in a bar, they started designing the spaceship. And today it's a project that 15,000 kids have already touched, playing with spaceship, building a spaceship, learning about space exploration, going to the moon. You start with the kindergarten, you go to the other kids as well. Even the president, our President Peres, is part of the project right now. But the best part is here, it's not a corporate project. It's not an enterprise project. 3 engineers, do it yourself, go to the moon, build a spacecraft, go to the moon, and we are doing it right now. This is how it's going to look. You see a demonstration of the first Israeli spaceship that we hope to land on the moon by the year 2015. And this is, again, do-it-yourself space exploration. Generating your own energy, building your own chess set, going to the moon. This is only the beginning. If you look at the list of technologies over here, do-it-yourself computing, AI, robotics, education, space exploration, biology, money, energy, 3D printing. These are all technologies which are not science fiction. It's here today. Kids can play with it. Kids can innovate, and they're doing it right now. And I want you to welcome the do-it-yourself or the makers movement. And this is what I refer to individuals being empowered to innovate and create their own reality and the next generation. Let me give you a few examples. One of my favorite examples is do-it-yourself education. I'm a guy who likes to learn and study and acquire knowledge. It is so easy today. I mean, we have no excuses. If you want to know something, just go out there, find out your best internet resource and learn it. Go to Khan Academy, go to Coursera, go to dozens of other resources. Go to Wikipedia, go to Google. It's out there. We have no excuses anymore. Do-it-yourself education, I think this is the future of education. We don't need teachers in every school. Actually, the best teachers will not be in schools. They will be out there on the internet, and welcome do-it-yourself education. Let's talk about computing. Let's talk about supercomputers. Welcome to do-it-yourself supercomputing. I mean, 10 years ago, a supercomputer was a weapon, a very expensive weapon, hard to find, hard to build, hard to pay for, and you went to IBM to buy a supercomputer. Simon Cox and his 6-year-old child built their supercomputer with Lego and Raspberry Pis. You take a Raspberry Pi board, it's a $35 board, you connect 64 boards like that, you add a few Lego pieces, and here you have a supercomputer. I mean, with the ability that we only dreamt of 10 years ago. Again, this is not science fiction. This is the ability of each and every one of us to fill his house with supercomputing, which is amazing in my eyes. I mean, I have some kind of an image about supercomputing in the future. In the future, I believe that computing will become something like a commodity, like a bag of rice. You want a very intelligent house, you take a bag of rice and you pour more computing power to your house. And those little pebbles, they connect, they interact, they understand, and they build a network in your house. Computer will become a resource that we use by volume. And if you want a big supercomputer, a lot of computing power, just add a lot. And this is basically what they're doing here. They're adding very cheap boards to build a supercomputer. like electricity or any other resources. But it's not just supercomputing. I mean, 20 years ago when I wanted to build my robot, I had to be an engineer. I had to do a lot of electronic design. Today, I go and buy a $30, $20 Arduino board, and my 12-year-old daughter is now building robots and playing with sensors and controllers and electronics and programmings and machinery with do-it-yourself robotics. Do-it-yourself robotics, do-it-yourself supercomputing. Do-it-yourself biology. This is an area which it's really exciting. It's also frightening, but it's exciting. When was the last time you actually designed your own genes, played with your own DNA, designed new living creatures? And yes, we can do it today. Again, this is not science fiction. This is a $100 kit that you can buy and join iGEM, and from that point on, you get components, but this time the components are not electronic or software components. You get DNA, you get organic components, and you can play with these components and you can generate new things. We all heard about Craig Venter, who actually created synthetic life just less than 2 years ago. I mean, mixing chemicals, using a computer, mixing chemicals and generating a new bacteria. He invested a lot of money in that process, but we are getting to the stage in which kids can actually compile, build, edit DNA, and create new creatures by doing that. So this is do-it-yourself synthetic biology. Now, if you feel that you need some resources, you need some money to do all of that, biology, computing, roboting, going to the moon, yes, it may require some resources. So you can also generate your own money. So this is do-it-yourself money, Bitcoin. What you can do over here, you can actually mine or generate your own virtual money. And this virtual money, Bitcoin, is not so virtual anymore. You can convert Bitcoin today to euros or to dollars, and it's becoming a real currency in many ways. This is the new gold. It's an electronic gold. It's a virtual gold. Instead of spending your energy going to the field and looking for gold and mining gold, you do virtual calculations over the internet. You provide mathematical calculations over the internet, and by doing that, you are being awarded with this virtual P2P money that you can later on use in other places, so you generate your own money. This is an amazing and a very disruptive innovation when it comes to the business that we know today, because you don't need governments here, you don't need banks here to hold your money. It's a person-to-person, democratized money system. You can generate your own money, you can consume your own money, you can exchange your own money. It's becoming a real thing. I would recommend that you read the recent European research on Bitcoin and how it's going to change the economy and how and all the issues that come with it, like crime and anonymity. There are a few issues over here. So, welcome to the age of do-it-yourself, just do it yourself. And for me, it's really an empowering individual experience. Robotics, computing, biology, synthetic biology, money, revolutions. You can start your own revolutions today, going to the moon. You can all, I mean, I'll give you a very personal note here. Since 1984, I'm afraid, I'm concerned. I'm waiting for the big brother to arrive. I mean, every door I'm opening since 1984, I'm looking for the big brother. Is he here? Yes or no. And recently I became quite optimistic. Because first of all, I didn't find the big brother, I don't see it. Somehow the big brother is being distributed among all of us individuals, not the big corporations, if you ask me. And secondly, I felt the opposite. I felt as if today I am much more empowered as an individual to do much more. We have never been so powerful as individuals to take control of our own economy, our own destiny, our own genes, our own environment, our own energy. We became way more independent. And you see today an amazing new movement, people getting off the physical grid, because they are less dependent on the physical grid. They don't need your electricity. They don't need your They don't need your food system. They don't need your housing system. They get off the physical grid. At the same time, we are all getting much more on the virtual, the internet grid, the connectivity grid with do-it-yourself. So look for it. I would suggest that the next 5 years, this is going to be the biggest revolution that you're going to see here. The do-it-yourself, off-the-grid, self-empowerment, innovation revolution. Thank you very much. And if we have time, I'll take a few questions if you wish. Please.
Is this going to be connected also to the new venture capital or the new, I don't know how you call it actually?
Do-it-yourself funding, Kickstarter.
No. I understand that you will open...
Crowdfunding.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that VCs today, I mean, Kickstarter is a good example, but it's not only Kickstarter because you have many limitations with Kickstarter. There is a new act signed by Obama just recently that will enable real crowdfunding. You will be able to go and sell shares. I mean, with Kickstarter, you're not able to sell shares. You're selling products or services, but as of next year, people will be able to sell shares, in the US at least, for their new ideas and ventures. So you don't need the investment bankers anymore. You don't need banks sometimes for that function anymore. So for me, it's a really important part of this whole revolution.
I know, but I guess what I meant is you as an investor, what would you invest in out of all these things?
I mean, as an investor, I think that I'm becoming, again, part of the crowd in that case. I'll be able to go and invest in what, I mean, it will be much easier for me as an investor to locate the ideas and invest in companies. Because today, as an investor, I'm quite limited. Kickstarter is not the solution today for investors. It's not. But as of next year, there should be a solution also for investors.
Your last comment regarding being optimistic, is it somewhat of an illusion that this power is distributed? Because companies do have a lot more information where we are at every moment of time about our personal lives.
In a way, it's an illusion, but it's the only illusion that is, I think, beneficial for my survivability, okay? I think it's a very Darwinistic illusion. I think that if you don't develop that illusion, it's hard to survive. So yes, I think that mankind is changing. I mean, if you're not optimistic about this change, you will not survive. This is maybe my statement. We are changing. Homo evolutus, or Homo technologicus, or Homo sapiens 2.0 is different from the current Homo sapiens. If you're not optimistic, if you're not happy about this change, you don't belong to this new generation. So from my personal point of view, it's my own, if I'm becoming pessimistic about these changes, if I'm saying to myself, oh, privacy is lost, oh, humanity is lost, oh, face-to-face meeting is being replaced by electronics. If I'm becoming what about the past? If I want to return to this glorious past of face-to-face meetings, not electronic, I'm not part of the future anymore. So yes, I'm optimistic, and I think it's the only way that I can somehow try and make sure that I will be part of the change and not excluded from it. Yeah, I don't know what do you mean by a real world. I mean, for me, Google is real, Wikipedia is real, data is real, electronics is real. Let me say something about the real world, okay? We communicate right now. You're saying that we are communicating in a real world, more or less. But think about it. I'm electronic. You're electronic. You have a thought. I have a thought. The way for me to communicate with you is to translate my electronics to mechanics, send it in the real world, you hear it, you take my mechanics, you convert it to electronics again, and you understand me. Now, this is not the real world for me. Electronics is more real for me than the mechanic of the speech, the mechanic of the air. I don't care about that. Real world for me is information. Real world is data. Real world is ideas. This is the real world. Now, the fact that we have some limitations as human beings to communicate things, and we used so far, we had to use some mechanical things, this is the past. Yeah.
So my boss cannot ask, did I ever meet a person from that company?
Secrets are illusion. Illusion that was developed really recently. I mean, when we lived in a village, what secrets have we kept? I mean, try to keep a secret in a village. Every time you yell, everybody hears you. Really, try to meet somebody in a secret way when you live in a village. We never had privacy as human beings. We never had privacy. Germs, bacteria don't have privacy. Monkeys don't have privacy, and human beings never had privacy. We developed an illusion of privacy over the last so many years, and I think that we're going to overcome that illusion, because the opposite to that privacy is real connectivity. When cells, bacteria, germs, lost their privacy and started to communicate one with another, they created the multicellular organisms. We are multicellular organisms, which I find it great. We now, as individuals, are creating the multi-individual, the multi-human, the multi-human organism. We are creating something which is bigger than us. I mean, you can look at Facebook or Twitter or any other social network as a nerve system or a communication system. And you know, in your body, when a cell is becoming really private, when he loses this function, you call it a cancer cell. A cancerous cell is a cell that doesn't listen or keeps his privacy, or he is not part of the whole body. We are becoming one big, or good or bad, I don't know. You want it or you don't want it, I don't know. I'm not recommending it, I'm not judging it, but I'm only saying that we are changing. We are becoming a new organism, bigger than just one individual, and we are communicating, and privacy probably is not part of this new organism. Yes, we'll have some cancer here and there.
This is not a dream, this is a nightmare.
I'm not saying it's a dream or a nightmare. For some, it's a nightmare. For some, it's a dream. My conclusion is that if I want to survive, I better think of it as a dream, or at least reality, and less of a nightmare. Because for those of you, us, in which this reality is a nightmare, the future doesn't belong to that, I think. Because I look around us and things are changing, and changing so fast, so fast. And again, the good news, don't lose the good news. The good news, each one of us can do much more, know much more, affect much more, experience much more. I truly believe that for us as individuals today, we are living in the best times ever. I don't miss the village. I don't miss the river. I don't want to live for 35 years and be killed by another man. I don't want to be a woman and to be raped. I mean, think where we come from. I mean, if you ask me about nightmares, nightmares are our past. Our past was a nightmare. We lived very short lives, very violent lives. It was life of rape and misery and war, and 60% of the men found dead in their graves later on had a...
That's a reality. Only 10% of the population in the world are living like you are today. 90% are still being killed and raped.
Much less than in the past. Much less. So my last claim here would be, this is the best time ever that we have ever lived in. I look around us, in terms of violence, in terms of peace, in terms of prosperity, best time ever. So I'd like to assume and be optimistic that the future is even better. The future is even better, and it's in our hands. Thank you very much. Not a typical innovation discussion, but thank you very much.
We are so lucky, Yankee, that we are all in this room. We are in the domain of technology. This morning I was stuck in the traffic jam, usual traffic jam to Tel Aviv, listening to the news. This is a nightmare, by the way. And talking about individual empowerment, all right? In technology we can do this, but what about other side of our life. But anyway, thank you for making my day, because you compensated and gave a lot of comfort to the news for this morning. I think some of your comments about how people on the very fast development of technology is a nightmare for some people and is a fortune for others. And I think that the talk of Mia Erez is about multicultural differences or stuff like this. Anyway, this is one of the areas in which Mia is an expert with her research, plugs well into this last comment. Mia is a professor at the Technion. I'm fortunate to meet her from time to time on the corridor. And she is also involved in some projects relating empowerment of women in the technology and management and stuff like this. She has a very extensive involvement in the north, in the Haifa region, right, exactly. So, Mia, go ahead.
As you can see, I come from the Technion, but that's where I also founded the Knowledge Center for Innovation to enhance innovation in the Israeli industry, because this is really our strength, our imagination. And getting back to Yanki's talk today, imagination is actually the essence of innovation. And it reminds me now that a few years ago I read a paper, an article in Haaretz written by Aryeh Ullman, who is a sculptor. And in his article he says that in Hebrew, imagination and similar comes from the same root. Think about it, dimyon and dome. And they are actually two opposites, but in some way in the Hebrew language they come both from the same root. And I think it captures the essence of what we mean by creativity and by innovation. And I want to convince you that we need both in order to be so innovative. So just to define, so that we have used the same language, just to define what we mean by innovation. So the essence of innovation is creativity. And creativity consists of novelty that is appropriate, and novel ideas that are appropriate and useful. Ideas that are not useful or appropriate to anything are not considered to be creative. They may be considered original, but not creative. So we need these, so to be able to innovate or to think about novel ideas, we need to think out of the box in a way. We use divergent thinking in terms of the cognitive processing that we use, which is a different cognitive processing than the cognitive processing we use to check for the usefulness and for the appropriateness of the ideas. For generating new ideas, we use divergent thinking. We think in many different directions, and we connect things that may be unrelated to each other if we think about them in the systematic, logical way. But to test whether these ideas are useful and appropriate, we do need to use logics and systematic, sequential thinking in a way. So creative people actually need to have both the imagination or thinking outside reality, outside what we have today. But on the other hand, these ideas should, to some extent, be related to what is known, namely to something that they can be useful or appropriate for. So our creativity is the essence of innovation. And innovation is, again, we see the duality here. On the one hand, we define innovation as the generation of creative ideas and their implementation. So again, think about it. For generating ideas, we need this divergent, out of the box, out of reality in a way thinking. But for implementation, again, we need the usefulness and the systematic and logistic and rules and procedures and methodologies to make it happen, to implement it. And if this is not enough, to be competitive company, we need all three of them. We need innovation, we need quality, and we need efficiency. And again, you see that we need to integrate different processes, different cognitive processes in the mind of people in order to make it happen. So, so it's no wonder that in Hebrew, imagination and domeh and dimion are from the same root. So, but today I want to focus mainly on cultures, on the factors that influence innovation in my view. And we can look at culture, by the way. If we define culture, we define it in a very general definition. Is culture is a shared meaning system. If we all share the same meaning, we belong to the same culture. Like if all these examples and ideas that we heard by Yankee, if we don't share it, we cannot relate to it, we don't belong to this future culture. So shared meaning system can happen at different levels. It can be at the group level, it can be at the organizational level, so organizational culture, it can happen at the industrial sector level, like the high-tech and the non-high-tech sector, and at the national level. And I personally, today, I also study the global culture, which is beyond the national cultures. But this is for a different talk. So at the individual level, and actually values, cultural values are represented in each one of us. We are socialized into a certain culture, so we internalize these values and they become part of us. And this is why I think the creative mind of people, especially in Israel, and the Israeli culture or the Jewish culture are related, and I want to convince you that it's not only the military service or other things that we read about in books like Startup Nation, but it's also the Israeli culture. So let's start with the individual level. Do you think that individuals can excel both in idea generation and implementation as an individual? Can I do both? Am I capable of both? Who think? Raise your hands if you think yes. Okay, and raise your hand if you think no. Okay, good. So the answer is, I also thought that it's yes, but we did a study and the sample consisted of hundreds, like 700 engineers and technicians in R&D center, not IBM this time. And we found that only about 3 to 4% are high on both capability, on both cognitive processing. We have some tools to measure it. So which means that the average person is not very creative, and it's no wonder that creativity is the exception, not the rule. If it was the rule, it wouldn't be the creativity anymore. Because creativity means something, it's a deviation from the norm. Think about something that doesn't currently exist. So we compensate for this scarcity to have both at the same person by forming teams to come up with ideas. Like Yankee just said that he put an ad in or question in the Facebook, and he get more people who know other things to complement his skills and way of thinking. So we did another study. This is from the Harvard Business Review. Actually, the study was published in a research paper, but the editor of Harvard Business Review liked the idea, and he wrote a short article about it. And it's about team composition. What should be the composition of the most innovative teams? What do you think? Should they consist of only creative people, or should they consist of other types of people as well? What, anyone wants to comment on it? What do you think? Yeah, the answer is already there, that's right. So we were inclined to think that the creative teams consist of mainly creative people, but we found something different. We found that you need some conformity in creative innovative teams. And the conformists in the team are the ones who know the system, the organizational system, because they are conformists. They know the power structure in the organization. They know the resources that the organization has. They know the customers of the organization. And they are capable of judging whether it's going to be useful and appropriate or not, this idea. So in the most innovative teams, we see this composition. There are relatively large number of creative people. Without them, innovation doesn't happen. But we also have the conformists, the one who know the system, the context, and we also have a very few percentage of people who are the attentive to detail people. Those, they are mostly the experts who know how to evaluate the idea or how to translate the idea into an implemented outcome, product or service or process. But if you have too many of them, they kill the idea from the beginning, because a new idea means that you sometimes need to prove the feasibility of this idea, and sometimes you cannot prove it by existing tools and methods. You need to invent new tools and methods to prove it. So the experts are good in a later phase in the journey of the idea. At the beginning, when you innovate and during the ideation phase, too many of them may just kill the idea. So now if we move forward to the organizational culture and the national culture, and I want to focus mainly on the national culture, but the organizational culture is also relevant, and it may either facilitate or hinder innovation in the organization. And if I define culture as a shared meaning system, this is the shared meaning system in the organization. And it differentiates between one organization to another. And it is reflected in everything in the organization. It is reflected in the annual report, even unconsciously, and it is reflected in the procedures and leadership style and rules and norms in the organization. So just to give you an example of that it is even unconsciously embedded in the culture and the organizational culture, I want to show you two pictures from annual reports. One is from IBM, and this is the picture that they chose to put on the annual report. And the next one is from Google. A completely different culture is reflected in this picture of annual report. So we cannot resist it. It's part of us. The culture is part of us, as the organizational culture as well as the national culture. So, and the culture, this culture is very, very relevant for facilitating or inhibiting innovation. And in one of the studies that we did a few years ago, we found this is, here you can see the results. It's people who are high or low in creativity, who happen to work under a highly innovative culture unit or in a low innovative culture unit, and you can see that you need both. You can be very creative, but if unfortunately you belong to a department that has no innovation culture in it, it's not going to be shown in your innovative outcomes. But if the same person is fortunate and he belongs to a unit where the manager is very innovative, encouraging innovation, and the culture is innovative, then it's going to be shown in the results. People who are not innovative, who are not creative, it doesn't matter so much. The context doesn't make much difference for them. The context is mostly important for the creative people, whether it provides them with the opportunity to express their creativity or whether it doesn't provide this context and then they cannot show their creative ability. Yes? No, it's not. No. What you see here is the performance. This is the outcome. Whether these people are considered to be innovative in the company. So let me compare the dark ones, the blue, dark blue. These two are highly creative people. But this one belongs to a low culture of innovation, units with a low culture of innovation, or leaders, managers. And these people with the same ability, creative ability, belong to the high culture of innovation. And you see that their performance, in terms of innovative performance, differ. When you compare these two, you compare people with high and low creativity under low culture and high culture of innovation. Okay.
It says that the people with the high creativity have 5 of whatever 5 is, and the people with the low creativity have 4.4, which seems to be very close to 5.
It depends. In terms of statistical analysis, these are significant differences. Namely, how do we measure statistical difference? We have, okay, so no, I'm not going to get into the statistics. And what is the characteristics of an innovative culture, organizational culture? It's first of all is tolerance for errors. If the organization doesn't tolerate errors, innovation is not going to happen there. Openness, risk-taking, psychological safe climate, namely if I say something, I'm not afraid that everybody is going to accuse me for being dumb. They're going to listen to me even if the idea is too crazy. Emphasize on innovation as a value. It's an important value in the organization. Learning culture rather than performance culture. If the culture is oriented toward performance only, then you don't have the freedom to deviate from the main goal or the budget or time constraint and explore. So it's important to have this learning culture. And another thing that we find very important is that this unit is open to knowledge acquisition from outside, open to go and learn from outside. Okay, so what we find, and this is this shape represents 2 traps for innovation. It's the chaos trap on the one hand and the bureaucratic trap on the other hand. The most innovative companies are found here somewhere in the middle. And as you can see, they integrate, on the one hand, some rules and procedures. You cannot coordinate the work of many people without some rules and procedures. But on the other hand, they also allow for some freedom and empowerment. And they are here because if they go down there, into the chaos trap, then no management, no rules, no procedures, you cannot become an innovative company. So this takes us to the Israeli culture, and the question is whether the Israeli culture supports this point of integration between bureaucracy and chaos. So before I go to the Israeli culture, there is also the culture at the sector level, and I just want to show you this figure that compared the exports, manufacturing export by technological intensity. The blue line is the high intensity, the high tech, and the red line is the traditional. And you see that from 2002 to 2009, there is a continuous increase in the high tech in terms of exports, but not in the traditional industry. So there is something in these subcultures that differs significantly, and this is something I'm now studying, so I'll be able to tell the results maybe sometime in the future. So let's go to the national level, and I would like to point at this book, the Startup Nation, which captures the innovative culture in Israel. And no wonder that it's the startup and not the mature companies, because there is something in the Israeli culture that supports startups. and I want to convince you that this is the case. So you know some of the Israeli breakthrough in technology. And this is the cultural values that I want to highlight as supporting innovation. I also study cross-cultural differences and in values and in norms and behaviors. And we use, how do we differ between Israel and Japan or China or the US? We use a certain tool that measures the dominant values in the culture. And there are 5 to 7 dominant values, of which I only highlight 2 that I think are most relevant to understand the startup nation, the startup culture. One is uncertainty avoidance. Oops, sorry. One is uncertainty avoidance, which means that the opposite is tolerance for ambiguity. The Israeli culture is very tolerant, tolerates ambiguity. Not everything needs to be defined clearly. We don't have clear rules to follow. And when you don't have clear rules to follow and you tolerate this ambiguity, you need to explore, to find your own way. And exploration is the essence of creativity. If you don't explore, you don't get out of the traditional way. So Israel, we all use this term "Yeh beseder," right? "Yeh beseder" means high tolerance for ambiguity because we don't know what's going to be the outcome. And this need to explore also facilitates this culture of innovation, of creativity. And you see that I just chose, this is taken from a study that I was one of the principal investigators in 62 countries, but I just chose 4 of them just to compare and give you the idea of cultural differences. You may say that the numbers are not highly different, but they are statistically significant. And the letters represent the level of uncertainty avoidance. And you see that in China and Germany, uncertainty avoidance is very high, namely low tolerance for ambiguity. Israel is considered to be one of the lowest cultures in terms of uncertainty avoidance. We don't need to avoid uncertainty. We feel quite comfortable in ambiguous situations. So this forces us to explore and to look for new ways to get to the final goal. The other value, the second value, is we call it the hierarchy and obedience to authority, or power distance as we use it in our terms. And hierarchy means the way we measure power distance or hierarchy in organizations is whether you feel comfortable expressing criticism to your boss. So how many of you feel comfortable doing it? Raise your hand. Okay. How many are not feeling comfortable expressing criticism? No one raised hand. So the Israelis are known for being very comfortable raising criticism to their boss, to the hierarchy. And again, you see, first of all, I want to point at China. We used to think of China as a high power distance, but it's not, it's moderate. High power distance, I don't have it here as an example, but there are 2 European countries that are considered to be high power distance. One is Italy, and one is France. So if you think about power distance, low power distance, as in Israel, which is also among the lowest in the world, other countries with low level of power distance are North European countries. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands also. So if you are low on power distance or on hierarchy, you are empowered to express your own ideas. And it's the bottom-up processes of creativity and innovation that just grows freely, wildly in our culture. So such a culture that has tolerance for ambiguity and no power distance supports, facilitates creative ideas at the startup level. But unfortunately, it is not enough to have these companies grow to become big companies, because in big companies, you already need to have some management, some rules and regulations and procedures and standards to follow. And this is not part of the Israeli culture. So this is the other side of the coin. So a question that I may pose to you to summarize this point is whether you think we should be happy with the startups and do not try to have them to facilitate their growth to big companies, or we should do the opposite. We should feel bad about not having enough Israeli startups going to become big companies. You know, there are two sides of the coin, because there's an economist who won the Nobel Prize, Spence, in the US, and he actually blamed the industry in the US, which is the same problem is also here, that there is more wealth, but shared by a small number of people relative to the population. And it increases the gaps between the rich and the poor. And this happens in the US, and it also happens here in Israel. So this is all, again, the other side of the coin of being very proud and happy about the startup nation. And how to balance it, to go to this middle point between the more bureaucratic or management type and the chaos culture is something that we are probably not there yet in our Israeli culture. So I think I will just stop at this point, because I saw the sign that my time is over. Maybe just something good about this innovative culture. You know, there is this World Economic Forum report that comes out every year. And one of the dimensions, one of the pillars is the level of innovation. It's the report about the global competitive index, the extent to which the country is competitive or not. And it includes many more pillars, 12 pillars actually, to evaluate the level of competitiveness. Innovation is one of them. So in the last report, Israel ranks number 22nd on global competitive index, and this is out of about 140 countries. So we are in a relatively good place, but in the capacity for innovation on this pillar, we rank number 6, which means that the world recognizes that Israel is really, there is something special about the culture here that grow creativity and innovation, that enhances creativity and innovation. But in order to become big companies, we still need to improve on the other dimensions rather than the creativity one. Okay, so I'll stop here, and thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be able to. Yes. You want to? Yeah. Okay.
On the level of risk that we discussed, you mentioned at the end towards building out larger corporations. It seems as though the innovation is extremely high. People are taking risks at, let's say, the seed level, creating tons of companies. But then at the point between creating a larger corporation to selling out to a company from the States, perhaps. Have you taken
IBM?
Or IBM. I mean, if it stays in Israel, then great. But if the entire production, moves out, then it seems to be a bit of a loss for our country. Mm-hmm. I just want to know if you took a look at some of the levels of risk.
Of course, yes. This is a good point. Innovation and risk go together. So maybe you have less to risk when it's a startup. Only 2-3 people may risk their money. But when you go to become a company, the risk is much higher because many people can suffer if you lose. And this also may explain why. Actually, to explain it, we have a great theory by Tversky and Kahneman. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics. And they have a prospect theory. I don't know if any one of you is familiar with it, but what they say basically is that the relationship between trust and between risk and the willingness to take risk is not linear. It's rather non-linear. You are more willing to take a risk when you lose on the low points, and you are less willing to take risk on the high when you have something. So when you have something, you do not want to take the risk to lose it. And companies, and this may also explain why there is more innovation usually in startups than in big companies, because they don't want to take the risk to lose. If they are big, it means they are doing well unless they start not doing so well. But if you don't have anything like the startups, the founders, the entrepreneurs who found the startup, then you are more willing to take the risk. And the infrastructure in Israel supported because the chief scientists provide support, financial support to startups. There are many venture capital companies in Israel that come to look for such great ideas and to invest in them. So I think Israel, compared to other countries, attract many more venture capital companies to invest here. So you take less risk in a way. And also, in terms of who are the founders of the startups, most of the time they are friends. So in terms of your trust in the other members of the startup, you start at a good point that you trust your partner. So you don't take this risk here. Any more questions, comments? What do you think about this dilemma of having many startups or investing in letting them grow? For example, the chief scientist, the government policy is to support startups. There is no government policy to support the growth of startups into becoming big companies.
Talking about risks as well, I think we should embrace our strengths and our competitive advantage versus other countries in the world. So we should do what we are good at, right? Mm-hmm. But talking about risks, there are different ways to minimize risks, and distribution, okay, of risk is one of them. It's not only distribution in a portfolio, it's also versus competitive advantage of peers. So working together with other countries that has different competitive advantage, financial or cultural, would be also good direction. And chief scientist is not so good at it because if they give money, they want they less support this cross-country collaboration. They want everything in Israel. So I'm not sure if this is good direction that they take.
Okay. But ISERD, I think ISERD was here. They presented here yesterday. Yeah. They actually support bilateral cooperation, as cooperation with the European community and with the US. We have Israel-US Chamber of Commerce. So there are other government, let's say, government organizations that support this kind of collaboration. Yeah. More? Yes?
Regarding the startups versus big companies, I won't go into which one is better, but I think Israel can't really succeed with big companies because the culture that you talked about, Israelis can't work for someone else. They want to be their own boss. So you won't find people to grow your company, and everyone will just grasp the idea of how it is to create a startup and go and open one company of their own. So I think we can't really grow companies here. And I think people know that, and that's why startups are so succeeding, but we can grow startups into bigger companies. It's because of
Yeah,
our
that's a
culture.
good point. I think, yeah, I think the positive side of having only startups in Israel is that there is no big company here to compete with multinational companies. So, and they recognize the creative mind here. So many multinational companies open their R&D centers in Israel, like we heard from IBM, Google, Microsoft, you name it. Every high-tech, big multinational company, and not only the electronics, but also GE, for example, have the R&D center here in Israel. So if we cannot go to become big companies, we host the big companies to be here and to exchange, and we have more exchange with the startup companies as well. I have a question for you regarding to it. When you acquire a startup company, what do you do with it? Do you keep it here?
Yeah, actually, we integrate it into IBM, one of the brands of IBM, software or hardware. We are trying to allow them to continue to work according to their vision and develop the new versions of their product. However, they should comply with the overall umbrella of IBM products and fit into it. Regarding your specific question, whether we should maintain Israel as a startup company or to allow them to grow, I do believe that one of the main dreams of a startup is to make money. And if we want to have additional startup in the future, and by the way, as we all know, that there are about 100 startups that are disappearing and 110 new ones that are popping up. The only way in order to incent the generation of new startup is that a minority, but a significant minority, will be successful in the marketplace. And as Eli Oper is saying always, by the end of the day, it's a closed community, and also those that fails are very important to us because they learned a lot from their own experience, and they'll be much better in the next cycle. So any investments that we are doing in startups, even if they are failing and not succeeding, is a very important investment.
Model.
Very important.
Yeah. So tolerance for failures, I'd say that it's an important cultural value to grow innovation. But even, yeah, but I do want to have your attention, and not your attention, but the government minister's attention to the fact that the gap between rich and poor is increasing in Israel, and we should think about a way to narrow this gap. Not necessarily by not having successful startups, but by other way to have a more egalitarian way to share, to allocate the resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mia. I must confess I'm very much tempted to join the discussion because my area, academic area of research is economics of innovation, and macroeconomics is a completely different discipline than what happens with the entrepreneur and the individual innovator, obviously. But since I'm moderator, I will not do this. Okay? But you are invited to take in the MBA programs that Mia is managing at the Technion. The course in economics of innovation is the only one in the country, and that is a lot to say about large and small size and technique and all the, the classical dilemma. I think we plug in now well with our next lectures, which is also on the area of small enterprises. Christine Pfeiffer, we can connect her from Rome. I think she's positioned in Rome. She couldn't join us here. And she's the General Secretary of the, I think it's in medium and small enterprises. Yes, SMEs is a forum which operates from Rome, and she will tell us the opinion of the, which is most common on the other side of the Mediterranean lake. Christine, are you with us? Gentlemen, can we?
Hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, first of all, to the organizers, to our member, the European Alliance for Innovation, and to all the speakers that spoke before. Unfortunately, I had some problems with the audio, but I could hear and fortunately also look at the slides, and they were really interesting. Now it's my turn. I would like to give you some, let's say, first input on what we do at our International Network for Small and Medium Enterprises. I'm not, I don't know if I can change the slides by my own.
Well, it was supposed to work like this through the meeting, through this piece of technology. So,
if yes, you could just switch to my desktop as I have them on now.
well,
And,
this is what the technician is doing right now. So if you bear with us a second, at least in the past I used this and it was worked well.
So in the meantime, let me congratulate with the Professor Ayres. I appreciated a lot of the input I received, and it's pretty much in line what we do in our working group. We have a working group on entrepreneurial spirit in our network, and exactly the discussion on creativity and culture for innovation are going in the same direction. So this is, let's say, one thing that I personally appreciated a lot. I don't know, can you give me a feedback?
Yeah, can you try to change slides now? I think it should work, yeah?
Yeah, we can see on cursor that she change the slides.
Oh, I think it's disconnected right now. Okay, all right.
If not, I just may ask Petra to change the slides, as I cannot hear you quite well. I tried in all possible manners, but I cannot hear you quite well. So I don't know what, if you are saying anything or if you are trying to switch the desktop. If not, let's do it. I will just tell you, please switch to the next slide.
One second, Christian, we'll try to fix it.
Yes? Okay.
She can change it? Okay, Christine, if you can, do you hear me?
A little bit, yes.
All right. If you can change your presentation on your laptop to full screen, then you can start showing your presentation. Just go through it like from your laptop as a normal PowerPoint presentation, right? Christine?
Yes?
Can you start your presentation through full screen, like you would present normally?
Yes, do you see my screen then?
Yeah, just... Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Here we go.
All right, you have about 20 minutes.
Let me first give you, let me first of all give you a short overview of what our network is doing and what is, let's say, our history. We were founded in 2004 under the Italian government, the Ministry of Economic Development, and with the moral sponsorship of OECD. with the aim to bring together stakeholders around SMEs to discuss on how to create new knowledge and how to do better knowledge transfer, better technology transfer, and let's say push the discussion on innovation. So we are a knowledge-based network. We are aiming at fostering transnational cooperation, public and private partnerships among economic partners and intermediaries worldwide to help to bridge the innovation and knowledge gap for small and medium-sized enterprises. That means my members are not SMEs, but intermediaries, multipliers for innovation, like, for example, chambers of commerce, governments, innovation agencies all around the world, but also many privates who give assistance to SMEs directly to make sure they can put in practice what they learned or what they got from it. As you can see, we have global outreach. We are currently represented in 40 different countries. We are 101 members at the moment. You can hear the composition. You can read the composition here. 20 governmental organizations, 19 international organizations, 12 international NGOs, and 50 networks and intermediaries, all from the field of innovation and knowledge transfer. This next, let's say, map of the world should just give you a flavor where we are represented. Unfortunately, we did not conquer yet the 5th continent, so whatever you can do to help us, it would be absolutely welcome. This shows you a little bit that we are still, even in 2012, strongly represented in Europe, but that other countries are reaching us more and more. To be honest, we are having strong collaborations now, especially with the BRICS countries and also with let's say the Gulf states, as they are really investing in knowledge and innovation in this period. The next slide shows you just the overview of public and private representation. We also have a lot of networks in our organization, other networks like, for example, URADA, you will know them, or the World Business Angels Network. On the other hand, we work together, our members is also UNESCO, the United Nations committees, and the World Bank and the Development Bank. Members' main activities: business creation, startup, new technologies, European Union SME Innovation Support Scheme. I don't want to read them through here all, but you can see IPR is an important issue, governance and business model of innovation intermediaries, networking, strategic partnership should be a better word. Main sectors of activities of our members, mainly the ones that are currently discussed more. What are the services? This is maybe an important slide, because I am pretty sure that you didn't know us, because we are quite a strong, quite a small organization. What are we doing for our members? We really try to put them together and do strategic networking. We have a project development unit. We have some working groups on how to launch, how to stimulate better entrepreneurial spirit, because Europe is lacking in this, and I am impressed by the numbers I have seen from Israel. We are having an Internet Academy, which is a webinar-based seminar per month. That's a lunchtime seminar. We do some twinnings to really match, let's say, different interests of different stakeholders, because, you know, it is quite easy to make policymakers discuss between each other, because they normally reach each other quite well. The same applies to privates, but if you mix them, and if you also put people from academy inside, the discussion is normally a little bit more difficult, but the output is much more valuable. So this is what we believe to do, and mix the stakeholders to really come out with first solutions for small and medium enterprises that are the backbone of the European economy. Let me give you an outlook on the annual meeting. We have one annual meeting per year. This year it has been organized in Korea, at Daejeon. Next year we are in Turkey, in Izmir, with the topic, the governance of innovation, building an innovative ecosystem for SMEs. You can see from the title, it will involve all actors, from financial actors to academy, to industrials. Obviously they are strongly represented, to also policymakers, because all together have to make sure we are going in the right direction. Here you can see the 4 macro topics of this event, just to give you a flavor of what we are going to do. And now let me come to my small input that I would like to add to this important summit that you are running at the moment. Somehow, living here in Italy and speaking to the many micro-enterprises that are surrounding us, you very often get the answer that smaller or micro-enterprises are not directly involved in innovation. Well, we are trying to give a new definition to innovation by thinking about this quote. I like it particularly: innovation consists in generating and knowing how to manage creativity. Also, the old Henry Chesbrough is important. The innovation game has changed. Today, you can really hear the main statements that micro-enterprises think they are not playing an active role in innovation, and here is, let's say, our starting point for many of our stakeholders to really see what can be done for those micro-enterprises. First question that we normally put to them is, why are you on the market? What are your goals? And with this, you obviously come quite easily to the problem of if these micro-enterprises have and if they are able to formulate their own mission. Then it comes to the definition of innovative capability. You know, you are all experts in that field, but I hope you give me, let's say, a good positive feedback that very often a clear strategy is not in place. An innovation ambition with the right competences is not targeted in the right way. There has to be a stimulating culture that is paying attention to innovation to make sure SMEs are really investing in the right direction. The management structure needs to monitor innovation achievements in the course of the time. So we need a monitoring system, let's say, a monitoring strategy. You need a good network of partners from different dimensions. We mean different stakeholders. Think about linking them to academy. I see that in Israel, thanks to the creative ways you have linked to small businesses, you did an amazing work. In many other parts of the world, this has still to be done. And then, last but not least, we need also some resources to be put into innovation to make sure we can put it in place. Another important role is obviously the ambition the entrepreneur needs to have. Think also about the generational change that we are facing in this time, looking at the family businesses that made Europe being a strong player in the last time. Coming to another, let's say, dimension of our stakeholders, I would like to speak a little bit about the policy instruments, some policy instruments to overcome SME innovation barriers. You know, SMEs are the backbone of our economy and also of our employment. I was surprised somehow that 92% of all enterprises currently a micro-enterprise in Europe. That means more than 9 out of 10 are micros or less than 10 employees, to make sure they are investing in the right project, in the right technology, in the right services. Obviously, innovation is a crucial factor also with regard to quality of life, poverty alleviation. So the European Commission, but also UNESCO and other international players did some surveys on what are the problems, what are you facing when you want to invest in innovation. First of all, SMEs normally answer there's a lack of financing. Others say there's a strong difficulty in exploiting technology. Think also about let's say, the third countries. Many of them now changed their mind and put in the first place the low managerial capabilities they have, the low productivity that can come out, and the huge regulatory and bureaucratic burden if you consider the globalized technology-driven environment that we face today. Going a little bit more into details with regard to those barriers, we try to somehow figure out what we can do here, at least with the service, with the training for those SMEs. With regard to the limited resource-based barriers, on the one hand, there's a human resource problem because there's a strong shortage in skills in innovation management. There's also a shortage in qualified personnel to manage intellectual property and knowledge. I think this is similar in all the world, especially with regard to the new economies, the emerging economies, where you have to protect your IP as well. With regard to finance, yes, there might be a lack of financial resources or also a difficulty to access finance and innovation project funding. You know, there is a lot out of there. There will be Horizon 2020. There are other government-related calls and programs, but it's quite difficult to get to those finance because there's a high success factor, for example. Technology, another important factor with regard to the limited resources. Limited technological resources, limited access to knowledge is normally one factor that makes a micro-enterprise remain a micro-enterprise, as well as the lack of technical know-how and also the unavailability or technology that seems to be too expensive. The next barrier, lack of innovation, information, is somehow becoming less relevant as the shortages in information to access new products and service markets is targeted by many European and international stakeholders, as for example the Enterprise Europe Network. So I personally believe there is now quite a lot of knowledge about innovation support in the enterprises. It's more or less a lack of time to make use of all of the information you might receive. While the lack of networking is still very strong, there is a weakness in networking in strategic cooperation with external parties, because very often there is a distrust, or very often it is simply difficult for SMEs to have the right partners to discuss with. And then lack of public support to innovation. Yes, sometimes there will be difficulties to access support services, funds, and inappropriate design and management of innovation support schemes. We are trying to give some feedback to the European Commission as we are somehow working with them as a dialogue partner in showing what went well in other economies, other emerging economies. For example, in Korea, for example, in Taiwan, for example, in Canada. This can be, let's say, very small inputs, but relevant inputs to see if we can design better public support services. One example is the innovation voucher in Europe. I'm sure you are quite informed about this. Just maybe two words about its history. It was first implemented by the Dutch Innovation Agency in 2005. Now more than 25 EU member states have those voucher schemes in place, and sometimes the rules are changing somehow, but also the sizes. It can come up to 25,000 euro. Normally it is eligible for applied research, project development, innovation management, intellectual property management, and the establishment of e-businesses, which is pushed quite a lot in our economy now. It is quite working easily, so the SME applies for a voucher. The regional agency normally evaluates the application, then the SME receives the advice from experts, the expert redeems the voucher with the authority, and finally all players shall be satisfied with this. I will briefly take it one step further and speak about the importance of innovation management to stimulate change and sustainable growth. Before the Professor Eres was showing Brown and Eisenhardt that slide, and I particularly agree with this, we need to have in mind also Porter's 5 forces, the industry rivalry, buyers, suppliers, they have their power, potential entrants, they can be a threat, the same as substitute. So we really have to start doing a high-level consultancy with our SMEs, and before with our intermediaries to make sure that they receive a good training. So with regards to Porter, did you know this? We suggest to have a strong analysis of suppliers, customers, competitors, and substitutes to make sure the SME starts to think strategically. And then, which is on the basis of a real training module that we have for 1.5 days, is the growth and change model developed by Knoster in already 1998, so 1991. So some time passed already, but there is still so much truth in it. So looking at the strategy, looking at the structure, looking at the culture, looking at the competences, the means and the results, we risk to go out of scope with our SMEs. It can lead to confusion, to chaos, to frustration, to uselessness. And I will just take you through this dimension again and see if you agree or not. In case I have good skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan, it can lead to confusion if we miss the vision. While if the skills are missing, even having a strong vision, it cannot work as well because it will finish in anxiety. In case we do not have incentives, there will be resistance in the company, between the employees, and so the system will not work. In case we miss the resources, it leads to frustration because it cannot be realized. Our nice plans cannot be realized. And in case we don't have an action plan, and this is a very important point for our stakeholders especially, it can become a real treadmill for everybody, and even there is no output. We have a special training for SMEs to approach venture capital in our network, because very often they are not prepared to present their strong, let's say, their unique selling points in 7 minutes in front of venture capitalists. So we really believe in the important role of intermediaries, be it from policymakers, be it from chambers of commerce, be it from banks and financial actors, to really have a training and to make them lower these barriers of innovation that they feel. And last but not least, we are believing that success is a journey, not a destination. And with this last quote, I would like to thank you for your listening, and I hope you could hear all my words. Thank you for your attention.
Christine, stay with us, bear with us a second. Maybe we have some questions from the floor. Anyone wants to raise any question? Yes, 1 second.
Hello, my name is Maya, and I'm a patent attorney, and I heard from you that there is a lack in...
Can you speak louder, please, because I can't get it.
Hello, my name is Maya. I am a patent attorney, and I heard that there is a lack in a patent specialist, and I would like to offer my services to your members, patent drafting and all other services to members of your of the organization.
I am not sure if I understood your question because the audio is not working.
Why won't you send an email?
Okay.
Yes, please. Sorry for this, but I'm not sure. I understood something about services, but I'm not sure if you pointed out on our network services or if the question was different.
Christine, she will send you an email with her proposal, all right?
Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
thanks.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wants to offer any services? Sorry? Yeah, Christine, there is a question from the floor. Yeah? How come Israel is not part of your organization? Can you explain this?
Yes, this is a good question. I understood the question this time. Israel is not directly represented yet, but this is just a small, let's say, comment. We have an Israeli member who represents Canada in our network. So she is living and working in Israel, but she has different, let's say, roles. So she is representing mainly Canada, but she is bringing fresh air from Israel to our network. Generally spoken, we would absolutely welcome Israel to our network. It would be a privilege. And so I am just waiting to get in contact with you again to discuss how further we can be of added value. I will tell you just 1 minute about how it's normally working. Normally, the application goes through the INSME board. 14 nations are represented, and I think it can be done in about 10 days to have Israel to the network as well.
Okay, we just to give you a warning, it seems like your organization is very well running, very organized well right now. Once the Israelis are in, forget about it, right? We'll bring the mess as well. Okay, any more questions, comments, offerings? Okay, thank you very much, Christine. We enjoyed very much knowing what you do there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I believe we are quite done with this session. So I don't know to whom shall I transfer the microphone? Yeah. Okay, so the coffee is outside there, gin and tonic later.